Have Alex. Hey everyone, thanks for joining so far. We're gonna get started in just a minute or two here. Of course, you guys have been with us for the last two classes, so you know how wonderful Kelly is and how much she has to offer as far as guidance. And so, really, there's not much for me to intro. She's fantastic, and I'm just going to leave it to Kelly to get started with our third installment of our year-end fundraising strategy class. So yeah, excited. Thanks, Kelly, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Candace. Thanks for having me. So we are on day 3. I don't think I need to say the name of the course yet again, but we are here to talk year-end with me, and Cosvox is hosting this. So let's talk about where we have been so far, the structure of the course. The first day we talked about planning. So selecting the channels that you want, setting up your online fundraising hub or your online campaign with Cosvox, how to make different channels work together across platforms, creating a realistic timeline for yourself, and project managing your campaign. Day 2, we talked about how to do really great copywriting and other ways to make your touches stand out. I really quickly breezed through doing mailed appeals on a budget. We talked about how to do your best email touches, the best social media work, and we did talk a little bit about phone calls and making that stand out and doing that. I really do think phone calls are a great way that small nonprofits can kind of stand out in a crowd. So I'm excited that everybody took to that idea. So today we're just going to do a little wrapping up and how you execute all of this. So we're going to talk about pre-campaign cultivation touches and, you know, how to set yourself up for success, measuring that success, when you might need to course correct, some key dates you should keep in mind as you build out your timeline. And then we're going to go over a resource that Cosvox has provided on how to actually build out your plan. And then I hope to leave plenty of time at the end for an extended Q&A so that you can ask me any and all of your questions for year end. So let's go ahead and get started. This should look familiar. I talked about this the first day, but this is your donor pipeline. And again, this is kind of the basis of a proactive, relationship-based, donor-centered fundraising program. So your year-end appeal, as we already talked about, kind of fits into that convert, solicit structure right in the middle. But your year-end appeal is in the middle of this pipeline, and I want you to think about how you're going to build forward and back from that. So how are you identifying the people you want to include in this campaign? How are you going to cultivate them? That's what we're going to talk about in just a second. But then also near the end, we're going to talk a little bit about stewardship, how you can follow up. And then obviously that's following up and doing all of the rest of the pipeline really well means that you can get upgrades and repeat giving much more easily. So just keep this in mind as you're thinking about building this out. And again, if you don't have a huge individual giving base, I did a webinar intensive that was called Getting Started with Individual Giving with Cosvox, excuse me. And so that is still available on demand, and that dives really deep into this pipeline and how you build it out if that's something you feel like you need. So let's talk about pre-campaign cultivation. So I like to say you should ask once, think thrice. Because our donors in the nonprofit world in general, I don't know how many causes you give to, but there are quite a few causes that I give to that I give, and then even the thank you I get back is asking for more donations, and I get so frustrated with those organizations, and I tend to not give to them again because it's very frustrating, because I feel like I'm just an ATM to them, and I don't feel as though I'm really appreciated as a donor and somebody who cares about their cause. So I like to use my own kind of irritation with that system to fuel how I fundraise as a fundraiser. So ask once, think thrice. So make sure that your donors hear a thank you before you kick off this campaign. Make sure they hear something from you that is is saying thank you, that's reporting back your gift last year, your gift this spring, whatever that segment is that you want to pull, make sure that they hear thank you. And I think for every ask you make, you should send like 3 thank you touches. This is not just to donors, though it is doubly important for donors, but I think even your general subscribers or supporters or the people who follow you on social media, saying like, hey, thanks for being there for us, is a really important thing to do to prep for a year-end giving campaign. So I personally like to do a series of 1 or 2 education or priming emails before I do any asking for year-end. Often I'll do 1 email to donors and a separate one for subscribers who haven't donated yet. And for donors, the vibe of the email is, you know, thank you so much. Your last gift of this amount that you made on this date has helped us accomplish all of these things, and I list out the impact that the organization has made in the past year or 6 months or however long I feel like covering. For non-donors, I tend to put something in there like, we're so lucky to have a generous community of donors and supporters. Our donors have helped us accomplish all of this impact. I'm trying to subtly say like, we're grateful for you, but also we're really double grateful for our donors, and maybe you want to be a donor. Without saying on the nose like, hey, you should donate to us because thanks to our donors we did this stuff, but no thanks to you. I still want to say like, thank you for subscribing, thank you for supporting. I think especially with the pandemic and so many people struggling financially, it's really important that we even say like, hey, thanks for being on our email list, thanks for volunteering. We know that life is tough right now and we just really appreciate you being a part of our organization. And then I like to make sure that those education emails are also building a case for giving without asking. So something like, in 2020, despite the pandemic, we've served kids by providing virtual summer camps and outdoor socially distanced workshops. Or something like, when we asked our supporters earlier this year to step up, you did that for us. Or, you know, we're so grateful for the people who have donated or renewed their memberships despite our, you know, our center being closed due to the pandemic. I think it's really, really important that we build the case for giving and message that this is because you gave. This is the stuff we did because you gave before, so that people are primed to be ready to give again to see what else you can accomplish. So plan a few of these emails and social media posts too. I like to do social media posts that just say, hey, thanks for following us. Thanks for engaging with us here, before you build into the campaign. And certainly if you have a theme for the campaign in mind, starting to use that theme and introducing that theme is a helpful step in this messaging. And if you're thinking about doing phone call solicitations, they're doing a round of thank you calls. I mean, right now, or early November or before the end of October. That's a great way to get some of your people to practice those phone skills and get practice interacting with donors. And I have found personally that if I have board members do a round of thank you calls first, then they are much, much more willing and comfortable with doing those phone calls to do solicitation. So not only are you kind of priming your donors that first you're going to hear a thank you call from us, and later when we call you again, they're less likely to be annoyed that you're calling. But also it helps your board members kind of get a feel for how calls work and how it feels, and you know, find a groove that works for them. So that's, there's kind of this doubly good side of doing the thank you phone calls. And again, I'll say I've done a lot of phone calls with a number of organizations I work with, and people are really happy to pick up the phone right now because we're not getting that personal touch. And again, this is such a great way for small nonprofits to stand out in a crowd, because I don't know the last time you gave to a huge national or international organization, but they don't tend to do these thank you calls. And so it's such a great way that smaller organizations can stand out to their donors. So so ask once, thank thrice, and get going on this now as soon as possible, so that you can fit in a few thank you cultivation touches before you start soliciting. So measuring success and how do you create targets? That's the number one question I get when I'm doing consulting with clients is, how do I even know what to aim for? So I'm going to walk you through some standard worksheets and stuff that I use with my clients, but certainly every organization, you've got to customize this for yourself. So first I encourage you to do a little math. So this is a worksheet that I use with my clients. It's available for free on my website. But you list out your past 3 campaigns, whether that's your past 3 year-end campaigns, or let's say you're a new organization, you've only run a couple campaigns. So what did you make in those campaigns? I'm trying to keep these numbers low because I know a lot of organizations are on the small side. For your first campaign, second campaign, and third campaign, then I want you to calculate the growth rate between those campaigns. So to calculate the growth rate, you do your second campaign minus your first campaign divided by your first campaign, and then you'll multiply that number by 100 to get the percentage growth. We're going back to what, algebra class, just for a little throwback. So let's say you've calculated out your growth, and I want you to average the growth together. If you have more years of data, that's even better, because you can kind of, 1 year might be an anomaly, and so only 2 years. If you have more years of context for this, definitely bring that to bear. I love having 5 years to go off of, but I also realistically know that not everybody has been running year-end campaigns that long. So average your growth rate together, and then look at, okay, if I apply that growth rate to my last campaign, what number does that leave me with? And that's a good estimate of, like, if you do the same old, that's what you're gonna get. So what I like to say then is, if you've been doing not a super involved year-end campaign, or it's been just a couple emails that you send out, and this year you're going to do a multi-channel campaign, you can probably expect to be on the higher side of the growth rate. So perhaps, looking at this chart, we end up with, this organization should probably aim for around $10,000 this year, given the history. But if year-end has been pretty haphazard in the past, and this year we're going to do a really well-executed campaign, I might say, okay, well, I think it might be safe to do a target of around 15,000 instead. Or maybe that feels like it's too big a reach, and we want to come somewhere in between, so maybe 12,000 is the right goal. So from there, you can kind of guess where, okay, this is what we've done, this is how haphazard it's been, or this is how put together it's been, and we think a real coordinated multi-channel campaign is going to do significantly more, or we want to keep it conservative. I do like to say, if you're going to use like a thermometer feature and put your goal out there, aim for the more conservative estimate, because you'd rather blow past your goal, right, than come under your goal. So just something to keep in mind. And then what I also like to do is kind of ground truth that. The math is just numbers. The math is just some extrapolation from past numbers. But if you can ground truth that and look at, I like to use this as a way to kind of test, okay, how realistic is this goal then? So I take my giving levels. So let's say my average giving levels are 25, 50, 100, and 200. Then I'm going to calculate out how many current donors do I have at each of those levels. And so a donor giving 20 or a donor giving 30 would go in that $25 giving level. And then I think about who do I know that I've had conversations with that I think might upgrade during this campaign, or things like that. So I like to put in the names of actual prospects, the names of actual donors that I think I can get to move up that year, or with that campaign. I use this for capital campaigns as well. And then I like to put in the number of prospects. So I'll count up the number of names and I'll put that in there. Then I'll total the number of prospects and the number of current donors and put that number there. And then I like to make sure I'm not overestimating, I never ever assume that everybody I ask and every one of my current donors is going to renew. I like to tame that by about 70%. So I'll say, okay, what's 70% of that number? Then I multiply that number by the amount in the giving level column and see how much, if everybody that I think is going to come through comes through, how much am I likely to earn from that level? And then I'll total that up to see how many people do I really think I'm going to bring in for this campaign. So often I do this to just kind of gut check the numbers to make sure that my numbers aren't lying to me, or I'm going to overestimate by doing the numbers. So I like to use that to find a realistic number for the organization that I'm working with. And then beyond that, I like to come up with weekly targets. So I don't do these targets necessarily to hit them every single week, but to know in general that I'm on track. So let's say you're trying to raise $20,000 with your year-end campaign. I like to take the total number I want to raise and divide it by the number of weeks I'm running the campaign. So I've got an example here that is a 4-week campaign trying to raise $20,000. So when I do that, I like to distribute the campaign knowing that so many more people give somewhere between December 27th and the 31st. I like to weight week 4 a little more heavily. And I like to make week 1 knowing that sometimes campaigns take a little while to get rolling. I like to make week 1 a little bit less. If you're running more like an 8-week campaign, you could maybe do the first 2 weeks a little slower and the last 2 weeks a little heavier. But the first week or 2 weeks, I divide by 50, and then I add in that 50% for the last week or the other 2 weeks. So you'll see in this example, my week-to-week goal, the first week I'm trying to raise 2,500. The second week and third week, I'm trying to raise 5,000. And the fourth week, I'm trying to raise 7,500. And then in the right-hand column, I've got the cumulative total. So with year end, I want to make sure I'm making my cumulative total. So let's say week 1, I exceed my target, yay, and I raise 4,000. And for week 2, I raise a little less than the 5,000. I come out at 4,000 that week. But cumulatively, with week 1, 4,000, week 2, 4,000, I've raised 8,000. So that exceeds this cumulative total that I have here. So, yep, great, I'm on track. But alternatively, let's say week 1, I get 4,000. Yay, I've exceeded my goal again. But week 2, I only get 2,000. And that means cumulatively, I've only raised 6,000. That puts me, you know, enough behind my goal that that's disconcerting. And so maybe that's when I start to reevaluate and say, okay, maybe week 3, I need to do a little something extra. So often what I'll see is if I'm way exceeding my targets, sometimes if I had a phone campaign, I scrap it because I'm doing fine and we don't need to use our board members that way. Alternatively, when I've seen a campaign a little bit behind, that is when I pull in the phone calls and say, like, let's do it. Let's hit these phone calls. So sometimes it means ramping up a little bit more on social media. But we'll talk about some of the course correcting right here. So course correcting, I like to not make massive changes to any campaign while I'm running it. It tends to kind of throw off your analytics. It tends to throw off your audience if you're making massive changes. So things you can do, I add a few emails. That's kind of a starting point. Is if I was planning to email once a week, okay, the rest of the campaign we're emailing twice a week. If you're already doing if you're not doing phone calls, add phone calls. That's a great way to boost results. But also sometimes I'll talk to organizations and they say, well, we've called all our upper level donors and we're still a little behind where we want to be. Okay, keep calling down that list. Call lower level donors. Definitely bring in the board, see if they can do some personal touches, some follow-up emails to donors that they know. The board can be really helpful in course correcting, and often I find maybe I've been soliciting a donor, I've been reaching out to a donor, and they're just not getting back to me. Bringing in a board member to tag team trying to contact that donor can be a really helpful thing. And bringing in your board is something that tells your donors your board is serious, your board is engaged, they're managing the organization well. So that's something that bringing in the board is always a great thing to do at year end. If you haven't been using a fundraising online platform like CauseVox that has a thermometer, bring in a thermometer. If you haven't been giving people updates on where you are relative to your goal, that is also a great way to drive some energy. So putting on social, making a target or a thermometer graphic that shows your donors, hey, on social, we're going to post a graphic with our thermometer. If you haven't been putting it in other places, that's a really helpful thing to do too. One other thing I like to do is state the need. If we don't make this target, these things won't happen. Or more positively, we really need to reach this target because there are more community members in need due to the pandemic, that kind of thing. Just be really upfront about we have to make this target because can be a helpful way to kind of course correct and bring enthusiasm. Then last, I like to add a peer-to-peer element to the campaign to drive some energy. Not necessarily a full fleshed out peer-to-peer campaign because that is a lot of work, but some peer-to-peer element where maybe I'll send an email to everybody who has donated so far and say, hey, if you could recruit 5 friends to give $20, if everybody who has donated could do that, then we would make our goal, you know, in a week. Something like that, that puts your donors in a place where, you know, they've already given, they believe in you, they want to help you make that goal. And so going back to them to say, hey, can you reach out to a few friends and tell them why they should support us, or even providing them with an email template to send to those friends. That can be a really helpful way to boost your campaign among your audience. So those are some things you can do to course correct. So some key dates that I always keep in mind when I'm drafting my plan. First off, well, I'll start saying it's an election year. It's a big election. Keep the election in mind as you're doing all of this. A lot of my clients that I am talking to right now, we are talking about starting to do kind of the thank you touches before the election, but we are not going to do any soliciting before the election because too many people are paying attention to the upcoming election. And there's just a lot of noise around that. That I don't want any of our solicitations or campaign launches to get lost in donors' inboxes because of the election. So that's a special note for this year. It's not relevant on non-election years, but something I am advising my clients to do right now is kind of do your donor cultivation up until the election and then think about your year-end campaign in early to mid-November so that I don't want anybody I'm working with to get drowned out. So the second thing to keep in mind, Thanksgiving. It's a day all about gratitude, which I have found is a really helpful fundraising day. If I do a direct mail appeal with an organization, I tend to try to get the mailed appeal to hit a day or two before Thanksgiving, if that's possible. Mostly because people, well, now a lot of people are just home all the time, but in general, people are home around Thanksgiving for a day or two. And so it's a nice thing that they have dinner, they're, you know, digesting dinner, they can read through your appeal and hopefully donate. Then sending an email on Thanksgiving that is just a thank you is also a fun thing to do for organizations. Something I think also we're increasingly aware of is the diversity, equity, and inclusion implications of Thanksgiving and what we need to be paying attention to. So think about with your organization what maybe that looks like. I've seen I've seen an increasing number of organizations do land acknowledgements just in general. That might be something to consider for anything you do around Thanksgiving. But also, I mean, I think that's on a lot of people's minds this year, and so something to think about as you're planning this campaign. Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is huge. And I mentioned this last time, but I see a lot of organizations that have a year-end campaign strategy and a separate, entirely separate Giving Tuesday strategy. And I think that is not helpful. I think it should be a larger, like an element of your larger campaign, but you don't need a completely separate campaign unto itself. So doing something like, we're trying to raise $20,000 and we want to do 2,000 of that or 2,500 of that on Giving Tuesday, or reaching out to your donors a few days before Giving Tuesday and saying, hey, we're doing a big Giving Tuesday campaign. Could you please send this email to 5 friends on Giving Tuesday to encourage them to give to us? Things like that. I like leveraging the donors that I've gotten so far in the campaign to kind of boost the signal of our Giving Tuesday campaign. Or we'll send an email to our donors and volunteers to say, hey, on social media this day, share it all over social media, plan to make a gift that day. So we do some priming too. I think that's something that people underestimate, as they think, oh, Giving Tuesday, I will do all the Giving Tuesday things on Giving Tuesday. But I find giving people a heads up, sending something maybe the day before Thanksgiving to prime them for, hey, next week is Giving Tuesday and this is what we're doing and this is what you can do to help, is very critical to having success on Giving Tuesday. Then you've got to cut through the noise, but stick with your own message. The one thing that I think is hardest about Giving Tuesday is everybody's trying to fundraise that day. So everybody's also getting bombarded with fundraising asks on Giving Tuesday. So understand that that's the case, and that's what you're contending with as you're planning that day. So make sure it's clear asks, it's engaging content, it's visual brandings that are going to make your donor say, oh, that's that organization that I really care about. Because otherwise it's very easy to get lost in the noise on Giving Tuesday. Christmas, Hanukkah, other religious holidays that occur in December, those are, depending on your organization, if it's relevant to your organization, those are also great days to plan around with your campaign. I think they can be asks or they can be an opportunity to say thank you. It really depends on the vibe of your organization. But I do keep those dates in mind. I try to look at a calendar and make sure any religious holidays, some shift dates, so some are in December, some are not. But I always try and take a look at as many different religious holidays that occur in December to make sure I'm treating them all respectfully. And then December 27th, everything I read, there's all this data. December 27th is a magical day. It's the second largest giving day of the year, other than December 31st. I have no idea why that is, but it's a statistic that I've seen a lot, and so it's something that I always keep in mind, is to make sure I do some sort of giving push that day. Email and social media in particular is where I try and hit people. If I'm doing a call campaign, I try to have that done before December 25th, because the week between December 25th and December 31st, I tend to, I did do a call campaign once, and that was like the worst hang up, no rate that we'd ever gotten for that organization, because people just, they're kind of in holiday mode at that point. It's getting too close to end of year and all that. Again, with the pandemic, I have no idea how that's going to be different or the same this year, but just something I tend to avoid. But December 27th is a good day to do kind of your final push that's not on December 31st. Something I like to do on December 27th is have some external validators. So when we were talking about a board member or a community leader or a volunteer who can kind of be an outside voice saying, wow, this organization is really great. That is a great thing to push that day to maybe try and get those final donors over the line and get them to donate before December 31st. And then, of course, December 31st, it's the end of the tax year. So it's the biggest giving day of the year because it's December 31st and people are procrastinators. So at the end of the tax year, I tend to just do kind of a pro forma reminder on that day. I don't really try to put a lot of time and effort into convincing text because it's the end of the year. People are going to donate or they're not. They'll have paid attention to the rest of your campaign or they will have not. It's another day that it's hard to cut through the clutter. So my challenge to you is on December 31st, this is your chance to practice your 2-paragraph case for support. Like I showed you those Casey Cares emails. Those 3 paragraphs, compelling picture. How short can you make it? How compelling can you make it in such a short, compact form? Because you're not going to get a whole lot of attention beyond that. So this is your chance to really put yourself to the test on that front. So building out your plan. Take a break, take a sip. All right. So building out your plan. This is what I showed you at the very beginning. So I want to talk you through how do you actually build up that plan. First, you need to have very clear goals. What are your financial goals? What, if any, are your quantitative goals? So I don't just want to raise $25,000. I want to also make sure that 70% of our donors who gave last year give again. So what, if any, are the other quantitative measurable goals that you want to make sure you reach? And then are there any qualitative or intangible goals that you want to reach? I mentioned in a former example, an organization that wanted to kind of educate their donors on what their overhead cost really was. And so that was part of the campaign that we built in. We want our donors to understand that year end supports our overhead and that our overhead matters. So that would be an example of a qualitative goal. Is there something you want your donors to take away from the campaign beyond just donating? And then I like to make sure to turn them into SMART goals. So if you haven't seen SMART goals, just Google SMART goals. But you want to say, you want it to be measurable, you want it to be time limited, you want it to be realistic, but also a little ambitious. I like to create goals that I'm a little nervous about whether or not I'm going to make them, but I'm pretty sure I can do it. That's where I like to land on my goals. So the way you'd structure a SMART goal is I want to raise $25,000 from 500 donors in 1.5 months. And you can maybe even have a secondary goal that is, of those 500 donors, I want 100 of them to be new to us donors, something like that. So once you have your goals, the template that you're going to get from Candace has this great plan and goals sheet. So this is a great place to figure out what you want your goals to look like. So I've got one goal associated with the donor thank you campaign that I'm going to do before I release this. Here's kind of the focus is engagement, and here's what we're going to do on social. Here's what we're going to do on email. Here's the goal of what we do on social. Here's the goal of what we're going to do via email. And then asks, we're going to make some social media asks. They're not going to be for donations. It's going to be share our impact and share options to engage with us. So that helps me structure then as I'm copywriting. I've got all these goals in mind. And then for my email campaign, I've got donor engagement goals. I want to share one story a week. I want to do weekly reminder of our holiday programming options. And on social media, I want to share one story via video per week, and I want twice a week to do a reminder on our holiday programming options. So I'm going to do a little more on social than email. And then these are the targets, the quantitative goals that I'm aiming for there. And then for our asks, I've got email. This is what I'm going to do via email. And then these are my quantitative goals for the campaign. So that's just as you're thinking through stuff, this sheet is what you can use to kind of think through those goals and make sure you've got them in kind of an organized fashion and not just a scramble in your brain or a Google Doc. So then you're going to build it out, the theme and the stories. Figure out what your theme and stories are going to be. What does that look like? How is it one person's story you're going to tell a bunch of different ways? Is it a bunch of stories? What are the graphics and visuals that you need to create? Figure out what goes into the thank you and education, what is best for asks. So as you're thinking about the stories you want to share, what stories do I share when we're saying thank you? What stories do I share when I'm making solicitations? And then how am I going to spread it all out? Is it going to repeat? Do I want to do a long form email and then a shorter version of that same story? That's something I've done quite a few times. Just what content do I have to play with, and how am I going to play with it? So the pre-launch education, this thank you phase, what are we going to do to get our donors ready for the campaign? How are we going to say thank you? Are we going to do calls, emails, social, all of the above? How are we going to educate them about their impact from the prior year? Then think about the actual campaign. How are you going to communicate throughout the campaign? What's the timing? What days are important to your organization? Maybe there's a day that, I don't know, National Cupcake Day. Maybe that's relevant to your organization for some reason. Is that something you can work into the campaign if it falls in the timeline? And then, of course, figuring out who's responsible for what elements of the campaign. And then thinking through your follow-up. Are you going to do thank yous immediately after getting a gift? Is it going to be an auto response email that they get? Are we going to send a personal email to follow up on that? Are we going to send printed thank you letters? Are we going to do handwritten thank you letters? Are we going to do calls? Something I like to do is kind of have a stratified thank you strategy so that everybody gets the automated email, and then anybody who gives over $100 gets a print email, and then or a print letter, and then everybody above $500 gets a handwritten thank you note, and then anybody who gives above 1,000 gets a thank you call immediately afterwards. So I like to do that just so that I don't want to necessarily do a handwritten letter for everybody. So everybody who gives me $5 gets a handwritten card. I'm going to spend more on postage and my time to do that. But what does that look like for your organization? Who's going to do what related to that? That's especially important this year if you're doing handwritten things or calls to coordinate if you're not working together in an office. And then one thing I do recommend is after donors have given, take them out of the solicitation emails. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a solicitation email. I send that out to everybody, but I'll have taken everybody who's donated so far and they get a non-ask version of that email that is a thank you version of that email. So I think sometimes people do actually get confused, even though they know we're communicating on a mass level. If they get a solicitation later, they say, oh goodness, did they not get my check? Did they not get my donation? What happened here? So I do like to take donors out of the ask email list as they come in. And then I always recommend doing a thank you call campaign in January. Once you're through the campaign, taking some time to call people and say thank you is a great way, again, to stand out and make sure you get another gift later. Especially if you do a round of solicitation calls, do make sure that you're doing a call round in January to say thank you. And then I always like to send a second thank you and tax receipt close to the end of January. Sometimes it's printed, sometimes it's email, kind of depending on the organization I work with. But I really, really like to do that. Donors love it because most of them have lost their tax receipt by then. And so they like having that secondary, like, it's about to be tax season, here you go. I've gotten so many thank yous from donors for doing that in the past, so it's something that I really encourage people to do. So if we're looking at this fundraising plan, taking all of those questions that I've thought about and all of the planning I've done, I build out a actual structured plan. So this is a tool that CauseVox has provided, and I encourage you to use it when Candace sends it out. But I've got November and our pre-launch. I've got the dates along here. I've got the purpose of each interaction every day, what medium I'm going to use to communicate that. I've got who is responsible in the organization for doing that, what is the activity or the theme that we're going for, how much are we going to make off of, how much do I think we're going to make off of each thing, and then anything else that I want to remember about this. So so you can peruse this when Candace sends it out, but I like to just make sure there's some sort of touch, especially with social media, every single day. So you'll notice some things are email and social, some things are just social. This day I've only got email, but I want you to build out like a daily calendar. I've even, I always try to plan this in. I try to do mid-campaign a quiet day or two where I am not worried about outreach. I like to spend a day or two looking at, okay, what have my email open rates been so far? Are my subject lines resonating or are they falling flat? Are people clicking through my campaign or are they not? What are our click rates? What do I think I need to do and reevaluate? How are people engaging with social? What of our graphics have people really liked? What has been shared? And what is nobody responding to? And then I like to use that to kind of guide the latter half of my campaign. So while I think it's important to have your key dates planned in advance, I do think there's a good moment in the middle of your campaign to go quiet and assess and say, yep, we're on track. This is going great. Everything we're putting out is going gangbusters. I'm gonna keep hauling through the rest of this. Or to say, oof, you know what? This isn't resonating the way I thought it was. Let's play with some of this messaging, or let's ramp up the emails because the emails are going great, social not so much. So it's really good to also plan in a day or two for assessment. You know, once in the middle of the campaign, or to have a day once a week that you're looking at that. But sometimes that gets lost in the hustle. Is you've planned the campaign, you're just hustling through the campaign, and then you get to that and you're like, oof, actually that landed wrong, or gee, I think we could have done better with this. So instead of waiting to the end of your campaign, do it in the middle. And then of course do it again at the end, because the more you can assess your campaign and your strategy to learn for next year. I think a lot of the times organizations say, woof, thank goodness we got through year end, done. But do your follow-up thank you in January, and then spend some time in February looking back at year end and say, like, this could have gone better. This really worked. People really liked this thing. People didn't seem to resonate with this thing. And don't wait until the next year when that's a distant memory and you're going, wait, what did we do last year? I don't even remember the theme of the campaign last year, right? Doing some assessment and writing it down can be really, really helpful right after your campaign as well. So then the project management starts. Take that plan that you've drafted out in that CauseVox template and then figure out your deadlines. If you have to send an email on December 1st, you are not going to draft that email on December 1st, I hope. I hope you drafted it 2 weeks ahead of time so you could really read it and review it and share it with coworkers. I personally like to send things to my parents because they're in a different generation, right? And see like, hey, does this messaging land with you? Do you like this? I like to share stuff outside of organizations to get feedback from people. And that means you really got to, back plan and figure out your deadlines, and you're not drafting an email the day before you send it. So really think about that as you build your plan. Because year end can get out of hand so quickly, so setting early deadlines helps you stay ahead. And that is what I have. So Candace, I will remind everybody first and foremost, if you need some help with year-end fundraising, you can visit fitnonprofit.com/causevox to request a free 30-minute coaching session. You can also go to fitnonprofit.com/year-end, and I've got that target worksheet on there and some information about what I can do to help you with your year-end campaign. And of course, we talked about the fundraising hub. I will let Candace talk about this a little bit more, but definitely, if you work with me, I will send you to CauseVox to build your fundraising hub, no questions asked. So I'll let Candace talk about what they can do with you for your end.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, so with CauseVox, you're able to run your digital fundraising across the board. So whether it's just a simple donation form that you need, or I would recommend, building out a digital fundraising campaign site. So you're bringing everyone to a landing page with a thermometer or a progress bar, showing your community how you've raised funds so far. And so, yeah, I mean, with CauseVox, we're able to help you really take that to the next level and help you raise more online through our very easy donation forms. It takes about 15 seconds to make a donation. And we have mobile payment options, Apple Pay, Google Pay, very easy for your donors to contribute on any device. And then as far as building out the campaign goes, we work with each of our customers hands-on to help you get a page up and running and built to succeed during your end. So if you're interested in sitting down with me and we'll chat through your year-end plans one-on-one, and I can show you a little bit what it would look like for you to fundraise with CauseVox. I have this year-end consultation that I'm just pasting in the chat. I'll also include this in our follow-up email. So I'm going to send a big follow-up email with both the template, all the links that we went over today, as well as all the links from the previous classes and recordings. So you're going to get all of that in that follow-up email. But I would love to chat with you one-on-one. So feel free to book that consultation and we'll, chat through your year-end fundraising plans and help you see a few of the ways that CauseVox can help. So we also have our basic plan. So if you want to take advantage of our basic plan, it's completely free, no monthly cost. We don't have transaction fees applied for that. It's just basically like if your donors want to give a little bonus tip to us, they're able to, but no fees on that end. But I really want to, let's go over all of your questions during year end. Kelly, did you have anything else to add before we jump in?
That was all I had.
Perfect.
That's all I had.
All right. So, let's go over your questions. We'd love to have more of an interactive discussion with you on the chat as well. So if anyone wants to go ahead and submit your questions, we can tackle them now. And then also, if you'd like, I can unmute you, give you access to just chat with us for a little bit as well and go over, all your questions. So there's the Q&A pane and there's also the chat. We're both going to be on to manage that. So anyone have any questions or anything specific that you're trying to figure out, like how it can work for your organization? Because we know like every organization is different, especially when it comes to, finding the right story or having the right framework in place to even shoot out those emails. Like what challenges do you currently have? And we'd love to chat through them.
Something I like to say too is if you're thinking it and wondering it, somebody else probably is too. So don't be shy about asking. But that goes for asking questions here and asking for money when you're fundraising. So works both ways.
So yeah, we'll give everyone a minute or two. We would love to chat with you. And also, if you prefer to just chat one-on-one, feel free to take us up on the offers to just book those consultations and we can go over, more details then. But yeah, any questions around even like just the templates or that great resource that Kelly shared earlier about setting a fundraising goal and how to access that. I pasted all the links in the chat, so you should have them, but let us know. So yeah, I guess no questions at the moment. And I do want to just thank everyone for being part of the class. Thank you so much, Kelly, for leading it. This has been really, really helpful. I would also love to hear from you. So I'm going to send out a survey and just would love to gather your thoughts and feedback on the class. But any thoughts and feedback now that you have to share in the chat? We would love to hear from you. Was this helpful? Did you enjoy the class? What was one key learning? Yeah, so we would love to hear your feedback as well. So, all right. How is your year-end fundraising plans going with your clients so far?
Good. I'm actually excited that a few of them have already like started working on them. Normally it's that like late October, like, wow, we haven't even thought about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I've been excited how many people are already thinking about it and trying to get real creative about it. So so that's really fun. Or trying to leverage late fall virtual events or virtual galas to lead into their year end in ways that I don't think, I haven't seen organizations doing quite as much in the past, is thinking about like fall leading into year end. So that's been something I guess if you've got to see the silver linings in all of this, it's that like we're all rethinking fundraising a lot. And that's one of the things I'm seeing that I really like is seeing a more cohesion across the year instead of the blind panic in mid-November.
Yeah. And I think it is like an interesting opportunity where, because a lot of like what you were chatting about was like multi-channel approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's interesting because a lot of year end has, of course, traditionally been more mailings or more of those sometimes in-person events. And so I think this year it's kind of interesting to see that being brought online earlier and more ahead of time, and also like the strategy behind digital and like seeing that adoption so far has been really cool because the strategies that work well now are the strategies that have been working well for organizations in the last few years, but it's just like that greater adoption of those strategies, which definitely has been proven to raise more. So it's been nice to see that like rapid adoption of those best practices.
For sure. That's something I've seen a lot with my clients is like, are all the fundraising rules out the window? No, like people still work the same way. It's, these are new contexts, but yeah, we don't need to throw everything out. We just have to get creative in different ways this year, for sure.
So thank you, Tasha, and thank you, Angela, for the kind feedback. It's been great to have you on board. And yeah, I look forward to chatting with each of you through your plans. Feel free to, book it if you'd like. And especially Tasha, like, I totally understand it being overwhelming. It's a lot of information, but I think once you have like the content prepared as well as like that timeline in place, you'll be golden because you're starting early enough where this should be definitely approachable and hopefully prevent you from being overwhelmed during your
For sure. I mean, if you don't start until the week before Thanksgiving with your external messaging, like that's fine. That's totally, totally fine. And that means you've got almost a month at this point to get this all in place and figure it out and think about it. And that's definitely something that part of why we did this webinar so early in the year is that it's good to have that amount of planning time.
And then Tasha also asked that she heard from a webinar that it's important to do media stories about your mission and something you have accomplished this year. She asked, should that be included in your year end? And will it help with finding more donors?
I mean, if you have contacts in the media that are willing to do a story on your organization, that's awesome. Like, certainly it's great to get their attention. I've not seen organizations doing a fantastic job of parlaying that into year end, especially smaller organizations. It's really hard to get that attention and hard to develop a cohesive strategy around it. I mean, one organization that I work with has been getting tons of media attention, and we haven't really seen that parlay into a lot of donations, just because they're not a food bank, they're not doing any direct service, and so I think it's an interesting side note on the work that they're doing, but it hasn't been something that we've really been able to parlay into a lot of donations. I think certainly having positive media and then sending it to your donors is a great thing to do, but I tend to see it that way. Getting news coverage is a great way to reinforce to your donors that you're worth paying attention to and you're worth investing in. But seeing that lead to tons of new donors, I haven't really seen that necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a different experience, Candace, with CauseVox customers.
No, I mean, I agree. I sometimes like it can help like boost some of the attention around an existing campaign, but if it comes out like in the middle of a campaign, but I would say it's probably worth your time. Like, of course, you only have so much time to really invest in all of this. So I would say, I think, focus more of your time on your own content and your own storytelling. And that tends to, pay off more than trying to get somebody else to do all this stuff for you.
For sure. And that's the other problem with media.
Yeah.
The other problem with media is they tell your story the way they want to tell your story. And that was an issue I was working with a client on. Was she said, I talked to this journalist for 10 minutes and they shared the one soundbite that I was like, oh, that wasn't what I meant to say. And so sometimes you don't have control of the message when the media covers your organization. And so that can be a double-edged sword sometimes too.
Yeah, I would also recommend just if you're looking to expand your attention and get in more donors for year end, I would try doing some digital ads, because that could be something that's really helpful for you. I don't know if you joined us, but we actually had a webinar a few weeks ago about using Facebook and Instagram ads for year-end fundraising. And so that was done in partnership with Community Boost, who specializes in basically, marketing for nonprofits. And so they shared a lot of great insights. It's a free webinar. Feel free to take a look. But I would say looking into digital ads would be a great way to sort of expand that scope a little bit if you're looking to attract some more attention.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great advice. And also, if you're trying to expand your donor base with new donors, I choose peer-to-peer over trying to get media coverage. Because again, it's you control the story and your donors control the story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, peer-to-peer has been proven like time and time again, like to bring in so many new donors that you just wouldn't have reached otherwise. So
for sure.
In comparison to when we see more of like a crowdfunding style campaign, whether that's for year end or for a program or whatever, versus peer-to-peer added onto it, where individuals are asking friends and family to contribute, especially during year end, that can help you stand out in the crowd a lot as well. but yeah, I mean, that tends to bring in twice as much, as opposed to just like crowdfunding. So peer-to-peer, basically twice as effective. So I
Yeah.
would definitely recommend looking into that as far as a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Peer-to-peer is one of my favorites. So.
Yeah, Melissa, thanks for sharing more about, what you're working with. And it sounds like, yeah, you're like a small organization. And so, I also think, like, of course, we went through so many different strategies, but you have to pick and choose what you can do and succeed with. And so I think that's like a big thing too. We're like just prioritizing, basically,
Yeah,
like, if you can't do every ask that you want and every medium that you want, what do you think is going to be the most effective for your audience, and just prioritize that, because
yeah.
we know that you're a small team, limited time, it's really hard. So
Well, and pick where your audience is. If you're a newer organization, you don't have a huge social media following, like, don't lean heavily on social media. If you're a organization that has a younger audience, like, don't worry about direct mail. It's really choose where your audience is and how to interact with them, for sure. You definitely don't have to do all of these to have like the perfect multi-channel campaign. For sure. Like, you can definitely pick and choose where your strengths are going to be.
yeah, definitely. All right, this has been really good. I mean, I really enjoyed just even our little discussion here. I would love to, yeah, continue the conversation. Take Kelly up on her offer. She's fantastic to sit down and chat about your year-end fundraising, and I would love to chat with you as well and help you, shore up that strategy, and then, of course, explore what it would look like if CauseVox were to help you fundraise, if you're interested. So also, if you just want to pick my brain on some of your ideas, like, feel free to book me anyway. Like, I love chat.
Candace has seen a lot of really great campaigns. So
Yeah, so I've been here 5 years,
yeah.
and so this will be my 6th year end.
Yeah.
It's been a journey. I'm gonna be doing a webinar in a few weeks too about year-end fundraising during COVID. So hopefully that can help you capitalize on some of like the latest trends and tactics too. I
Yeah,
mean,
for
you
sure.
went over so much that's like so applicable, but in case anyone needs more year-end.
Never have too much year end.
So there's more content coming out soon. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Kelly.
Awesome.
Everything you shared was really really fantastic and very tactical today. I like how there's so much that is like so easily applied. So yeah, let's continue the conversation. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for the course and today's class as well. And I'll be sending out that follow-up email with all of these resources and everything that you can use to really plan and implement your year-end strategy. So keep an eye out for that email. Should be going out tomorrow. And if there's anything else I can do, just feel free to reach out anytime. All right. Thanks so much, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Candace. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Yeah, bye.